Everybody, and welcome to my channel. Today we're going to be making a fabric coaster. This fabric coaster is made out of a star block and it does include flying geese. And I'm going to show you the easiest way to how to make a flying geese block. And also I've got a great tip inside the video, how to keep your points. Well, let's get started and I'll show you how it's done. And if you'd like to sew along, I do have the measurements for the fabrics in the description box. We're going to begin by making our flying geese sections. What we're going to be doing on our 8 little sections is we're going to be drawing diagonal lines. And what I like to do whenever I'm drawing my diagonal lines, because the fabric can be cut on the bias and could make it a little bit stretchy, so I like to draw my diagonal lines from the center out. And be sure to place your drawn line in the center. Since the bottom of the rectangular piece of fabric is on the bottom, if you have a little bitty design and you want to have it upright, be sure to place or turn your fabric the correct direction. Now we're going to be sewing on the drawn line, and with these fabric pieces being small, I do like to decrease my stitch length to a 1.8 or below. And now we're going to trim. You can trim up to 1/4 of an inch on the right side of the sewn line. And now it's time to iron. We're first going to just press our seam to relax our seam, and then we're going to finger press open. And then we're going to apply the iron. Do not rock your iron back and forth when I'm hovering over my fabric. That's all I'm doing. I'm actually not pressing. And I'm also using a clapper. It's not necessary, but it helps me to keep my seams flat. And now we're going to use the same technique for the opposite side. And pinning is just optional as well. Whenever I begin to sew, I do remove my pin prior to sewing. And now sew on your drawn line. And now we're going to trim up to 1/4 of an inch seam allowance from the sewn line. And iron in the same fashion. First, press your seam to relax them, and then open and finger press, and then press your iron. And now it's time to build our block. I begin by adding the corners, and then our center block, and now the flying geese. And whenever you're placing your flying geese, the points go toward the center. Now we're going to be stacking column 2 onto column 1, and if you'd like to pin you can, but I'm going to be chain piecing, so I'm just going to stack my blocks. And now sew with a scant 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. And now we're going to be adding column 3 onto column 2. And since these are chained together, I'm not going to be able to do that again, so I'm going to have to go ahead and pin, so I'll keep my segments together. And now sew with a scant 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. And now on our next section, I'm going to be showing you how to keep your points. See the 2 seam sections where it's pointed into a V? If you sew right below that, your star will keep its point. Now I'm going to make my little blocks into sections, and it's time to iron. This is a small project, so I'm going to be ironing my seams open. I first finger press and then press with the iron. And I'm going to flip up the bottom part and then match the seams, pin, and then we're going to be sewing with a scant 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. And now repeat on the opposite side. And now trim if necessary. Our next step is to add the batting. What I like to do is trim my batting to the same size as my block. And then once my batting has been cut, I like to trim 1/4 of an inch off of each side of the batting. That way it gives me a little bit of leeway whenever I'm turning my project. It's not going to be super bulky. And the back piece doesn't have to be as large as mine. This is just a piece of scrap fabric. So I'm placing it on there, and what we're going to be doing is sewing a scant 1/4 of an inch all the way around, excluding in between the two drawn lines. That's where we're going to be turning. And now pin to keep your fabrics in place. And now trim. And then on the corners, we're just going to clip our corners, but be sure not to go through your sewn seam line. And now turn right side out. And for the corner, you can even use a chopstick. And then I finger press where the opening is, and then we're gonna iron. Once ironed, then we're gonna top stitch with an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. On the corners, be sure to keep your needle down and then pivot. And then backstitch at the end. These coasters are so fun and easy to make. What do you think about the flying geese? Wasn't that easy? And it's a super way to use up scraps and also charm squares. If you consider subscribing, I've got a lot more videos coming out soon. Well, thanks for watching, everybody. Happy sewing, and see you next time.